Hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is Catherine Patricia Cobbler, and I am a teaching artist for the Arts Alive program at the NAC. I have the pleasure of being the host of this webinar and introducing our presenter, Eric Booth. A recipient of the highest award in U.S. arts education, Americans for the Arts Arts Education Leadership Award, Eric Booth was named one of the 50 most influential people in the arts in the U.S. Beginning his career as a successful Broadway actor, Eric is the author of 7 books and over 35 published articles. The Everyday Work of Art was a bestseller, and the Music Teaching Artist Bible is used as a textbook around the world. He has been on the faculty of the Juilliard School, Tanglewood, the Kennedy Center, and Lincoln Center Education. Eric serves as a consultant for many arts organizations, 5 national service organizations, cities, states, and businesses around the U.S. As a frequent keynote speaker, Eric Booth founded the International Teaching Artists Conference, which now has become the year-round International Teaching Artists Collaborative. Eric Booth was given the first honorary doctorate for a career as a teaching artist. Let's welcome Eric.
Catherine, so nice. Thank you. A pleasure to be with my Canadian colleagues tonight. And for me, these are precious occasions. And thanks to you and the NAC for creating it. This is part of a series, isn't it?
It is, yes. You're the second in the series.
All right, second in the series gives us a chance to take a look at this idea of teaching artistry tonight. And I bet there's somebody in our audience that thought, now who is this sleeping giant person? And I hope by the end of this chunk of time that that's pretty clear, and that the sleeping giant is this field of teaching artistry that hasn't yet risen to its full gigantic power, but it's occasions like this that give us a chance to take that latent potential and activate it in Canada. And special thanks to the NAC for creating an occasion like this. Really, they're kind of rare. I mean, I'm officially old now, Catherine, something you wouldn't know about.
Yeah.
And for 40 whatever years of trying to encourage forward this field of teaching artistry, there aren't that many occasions when a major organization chooses to put in the spotlight this field of teaching artistry that thrives usually under the radar and omnipresent but under the surface, chooses to put it forward in the chance of awakening new interest, new connections, and new awareness for the enormity of the potential this field holds. So that's my goal for tonight.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to it.
Thanks so much. Should I just jump in?
Yeah.
All right. In this chunk of time, I'm going to talk a bunch. We're going to do an interactive teaching artist activity. Teaching artistry shouldn't just be all talk about teaching artistry. And then I'm going to lay out some of the fundamentals of the practice and of the field. And then I hope to tease your interest with just how significant this potential of teaching artistry is. The hope is, for those of you that don't know so much about teaching artistry, you're drawn to find out more. And for those of you who do know a fair bit about teaching artistry, are refreshed in your commitment to find ways to make connections and bring it forward. My fondest dream as an official geezer of this field is that the organic networking that is so close to the surface and happens locally in bits and pieces can actually start to catalyze into the full strength of this field. I'm not going to take a lengthy history of teaching artistry, but artists have been in schools and communities since people were painting on cave walls. Those bone flutes 300,000 years ago, that music was not made for dance parties. That music was providing a significant cohesive fabric for that community as teaching artists do now. And those cave paintings did more than improve resale value for caves. They, in fact, were the story carried forward, taught to the young, the knowledge held in a species was captured and shared in those, and that is still the work of teaching artistry. The number one job of an artist, I bet there's many listening tonight that know the answer to this, is to make worlds. Worlds that hold meaning and of value, and then invite people in to explore those worlds. The number one job of a teaching artist is to activate the artistry of other people. This innate, universal birthright capacity we all have that is so squelched by much of our contemporary culture. Teaching artists have the skills and the delight in activating that capacity and then guiding it into any number of possibilities. It is so powerful. It can be guided into increased accomplishment in schools, or it can be guided into changes in psychological and social capacities. It can be guided into greater health outcomes. And teaching artists are the workforce that know how to do that. And it all comes down to activating this power of artistry in other people. And artists, it isn't that you're an artist and then you get a separate kit bag of tools that make you a teaching artist. Teaching artistry is an expansion of your innate artistry. You're doing everything you can, not just to make that world of art, but to make it possible for other people to come in and find what's so powerful, what it holds, what we who know the arts well, know the richness it holds, but so many others don't have access or don't have enough familiarity to know how to navigate their way into that world and obtain what it holds. Teaching artists do that, and once that artistry is activated, it can be channeled into any number of different outcomes. All right, that's enough blather for beginning. I think it's time for our activity. So here's how it's going to work. I am going to perform a live work of art for you, the same small work of art 4 times in a row. Doesn't sound very exciting. And your challenge is to notice what I do that prepares you for each hearing. I'm going to do a little something before it each time. Notice your response to the preparation and how that affects your experience of the work of art. So all you have to do is pay close attention to what's happening inside you in both the preparation and then the encounter with the work of art, because that's when it really comes down to it. There's a preparation, but then it's just down to you and that artwork. And there's either a good connection or no connection, but it's up to the verbs of art in you at that point, not just the noun of art that you're looking at. So let's try it with 4 different rounds and a different preparation each time. Your job, just pay attention to what's happening to you and remember a little bit, because we'll gather our thoughts at the end. Okay, first time, no preparation, the way it usually works in the world when an artwork is dropped into your unsuspecting day. So here we go. And just notice and be truthful to yourself what your true experience of this unprepared for artwork is. Here we go. The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Thank you. Yes, that's the end. And take quick mental note. What was your actual experience of that artwork? Hold on to it, because we're about to begin round number 2 that has a little preparation before it. I wish, you know, that little gizmo in Men in Black when they go pop and you completely forget what just had happened? I wish I had that for this now, so you've never heard that poem before. Anyway, here we go. Pop. Forgot it. Second time. In a moment, I'm going to speak the poem The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams, one of the most famous poems of the 20th century. Williams, born in Rutherford, New Jersey in 1883, studied poetry and medicine in high school and then in college. He wanted to be a dual major. His parents encouraged medicine. He decided to go for both. And in fact, he became a practicing pediatrician and a professional poet. He became famous as part of the Imagist movement with Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot, and then fell out of public favor in the 30s and 40s, but rose back in again to American popularity because he was a very beloved mentor to the Beat poets, particularly Allen Ginsberg. And he continued writing poems until his death in 1963. The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Take quick note. What did you actually feel during that introduction? And did it change your experience of the poem? And if so, in what way? Make mental notes. Here comes our third. Men in Black. Pop. Can't remember. The Red Wheelbarrow. Since the poem is comprised of one sentence broken up in various intervals, it's truthful to say that so much depends upon each line of the poem. That's because the form of the poem is also its meaning. And by the end of the poem, the image of a wheelbarrow is seen as the actual poem. As in a painting, when one sees the image of an apple, the apple represents an actual object in reality. But since it is part of a painting, the apple also becomes the actual work of art. In line 3, the vivid word red lights up the scene, and you notice how the monosyllabic words in the third line elongate it, putting an unusual pause between the word wheel and barrow, effectively breaking down the image into its most basic parts. The reader feels as though he or she were scrutinizing each part of the scene. Then in the 5th line, the literary device assonance uses glazed to evoke another painterly image. And then the last lines offer up the final brushstroke to this still life poem when white is used in contrast to the earlier red, and the unusual view of the ordinary wheelbarrow provides a dissected image and a redefinition of the common concept of poetry. The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Mental notes. Tell the truth. How did you feel during that preparatory talk? And how did it affect the quality of your experience of just you and the poem? You'll be glad. Here comes our last try. Pop, Men in Black. Not long ago, I discovered the true story of something that happened to William Carlos Williams that led him to compose The Red Wheelbarrow. He was a pediatrician back in the days when doctors made house calls. And he had this one young girl patient who lived on a farm in New Jersey. And he would visit her every day. And she was had this disease that had her teetering between life and death for really for many days at a time. And he would visit her day after day, and she's right on the brink. And he would sit beside her and think about her day. And one day, after he'd examined her, he looked down the foot of her bed to the window out there on a rainy afternoon and looked into the farmyard at what she sees all day long. And he went home and he wrote, "So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens." Okay, that is an official end to our moderately manipulative social science experiment in the arts. But let me go back and point out what I was hoping you might experience, and that I've heard from others who have. In that first listening with no preparation, you maybe grabbed an image or two, or maybe you actually had heard the poem before and vaguely remembered it. You may have had some evocation of farm, but it's really hard in the first time improvisation of listening to actually grasp a work of art unless it is set up for you well. And so often, I know in my own art going, I'm in the art club, but a lot of people aren't. But even I struggle with a piece of music I don't know anything about. I'm grappling with it. It's hard for me to own it. And the most standard thing we do, that second listening, is we give people information. In this case, a biography of the poet. What do we usually find in programs? A biography of the composer, factual information. And what I normally hear from people is that it's maybe a little bit interesting, but it really doesn't illuminate the artwork. People are generous in their listening. They're like hoping something relevant and good is going to pop up that makes their heart connect, but it's up here in the head. It says information is useful and you should be able to apply it somehow to the magic of experiencing, but we don't really. And maybe you got a little more out of the poem this time, or the word images connected, but there was really a disconnect between the offer of enriching your experience and what it actually did. And that is standard operating procedure in our field. The third one, did it have a vague overtone of academia? It came right off an academic website, word for word. And this is when the expert tells you how lucky you are to see it through his lens. A little mansplaining about what is important here. And lucky you, if you look through my lens, you will see the things that are important about this artwork. How did it make you feel? Did it warm you to discovery? Did it make you feel that what you brought to this encounter was what was important here? Did it make you open your heart to that artwork? Probably not. In fact, for most people who hear that particular exercise, it pisses them off. It brings back all that forced academia that wasn't aimed for their personal relevance. And this should about how you encounter the arts, all of that possibly diminished the quality of your encounter, even though it was done with the best expertise we could bring. And then that fourth, which I would call the teaching artist approach, which in that case, and I hope it worked for you, I hope you actually began to feel a connection to the world of that poem, and that you began to actually lean imaginatively forward into the poem and make some kind of connections to it. You'll notice I told a story. I gave no information about the poem itself. I didn't tell you how to listen. I trusted you with that. All I did was invite you into an entry point through story, one of the most ancient tools of the teaching artist. And through that opening, I invited you to make connections. Look at that idiom, make a connection. It's the world's smallest artistic act. You can't make a connection unto somebody. We ourselves must make that connection. And if it worked for you, if you began to feel something or conjure something that felt valuable, your artistry had been activated and applied to the discovery of an artwork. If it worked, if the magic worked in that case, we accomplished something remarkable. We opened up a work of art without my telling you anything. One of the rules of teaching artistry, engagement before information. We engaged you, and this miracle happens. After one is engaged, one becomes curious for more information. That's why teaching artistry in school has such a catalytic effect on all learning with those students. Why almost invariably academic achievement increases. There's a kind of ripple effect of academic benefits when teaching artists are invited to do their work in a school. And it's because we activate the artistry of the young people. And I hope you felt just a little taste of it, because that little gesture that, if it worked, made you care, made you answer the question, what depends on this domestic scene? It opens the social imagination in which the power of universal artistry lies. Now let's follow that power. And Patrick, if you could do a screen share with the document called The Fundamentals. I want to do just a quick cruise through for our participants here on the 6 fundamentals of teaching artistry. We're not going to take a ton of time with these, but I want you to know these are kind of the irreducible core basics of this art called teaching artistry. And the first I've already mentioned, which is the number one job of a teaching artist, is to activate the artistry of others. But second, teaching artists are adept with creative processes. Artists are too. They engage in them when they make all that amazing stuff. Teaching artists open up the processes for others to participate in, artistic processes. They balance the focus on process and product. So much of stuff in schools and in society is product oriented. Teaching artists open up all the amazing stuff that lives in processes, where all the learning lives, where all the vitality lives. Teaching artists have a different balance of process and product, and they love the richness of process. Teaching artists are very good at creating working environments quite quickly with almost any group of participants. I not long ago had a workshop with the board of directors of Federal Express, and they were terrified. An artsy guy was coming in there, and my God, he had a theater background. He's going to make them look idiotic. Within 5 minutes, I had them making stuff they care about. That's the term I use instead of art. Make stuff you care about. And once they were making stuff they cared about, they were opening up, they were accomplishing what our workshop was all about. The capacity to create a safe enough space so people aren't afraid to participate, but not just safe and charged. So there's this spark of energy in it, which often includes the ruthless use of fun. Teaching artists see their work not as the delivery of activities, but as engaging in inquiries. They're curious about everything. Every teaching artist activity is an inquiry into discovering something that's interesting for both the teaching artist and the participants. It's discovery process, it's growth mindset to find out what we can create together. So teaching artists live in inquiry, not in artistic production. Authenticity, I often speak of the law of 80%. And this is a big truth. 80% of what you teach is who you are. All those good handouts and activities, very valuable, 20%. For a teaching artist, the true power of what you offer lives in the quality of the listening you bring to every participant's offer, the way you pick up on ideas and make stuff with them. You make connections, you co-learn, you discover. That's where people are seeing, oh, that's what the verbs of art look like in action. That's what draws out people's artistry and makes them drawn into making stuff they care about, is the sheer way you think, your habits of mind, your passionate interest in what they've got that they might share. That is the authenticity of the artist that makes for a strong teaching artist. And finally, teaching artists are all about next and new and what is possible, imagining new worlds. I often think of that term from the psychologist William James. Teaching artists are after the more, that which is just beyond the reach, and that gives it a very special feel. Thank you, Patrick. And if you could throw up our purpose threads and drop my notebook. The purpose threads are a suggestion of how the field of teaching artistry actually works. For many years, teaching artistry was described by where you worked. You know, teaching artists mostly work in schools, but then said, oh yeah, well, there's also teaching artists who work in communities. And oh yeah, I guess there's also separate teaching artists who work in this occasion. And I realized that wasn't helping the field grow. So I redesigned the field according to what we are hired to accomplish. And when I finally boiled it down, teaching artists are hired to accomplish 7 different purposes. And I call them the purpose threads. And this really provides the landscape of our field. And I see it all around the world. I know it lives in Canada. And let me just breeze you through these 7, because I hope you'll be listening for the ones that have an especial appeal to you. Because my fondest dream for this evening is that you have a blip more interest to pursue one of these threads and build on it, build for yourself and build for the field. So the most obvious or most common purpose is the work of art thread. That was the one I used with the wheelbarrow exercise, where my purpose was to enhance the encounter with a work of art. When I first became a teaching artist in 1979, it was at Lincoln Center. And that's what we were hired to do, to prepare people to encounter works of art performed at Lincoln Center. And it's broadened now, where works of art widely, almost every significant arts organization in North America has teaching artists who are working to help enhance people's quality of encounter. So those without the fortunate background that lets them have the natural skills to know how to find their way into artworks and even weird artworks, that it's much more full opportunity for everyone because of teaching artists to actually help everyone find their place, find their meaning inside works of art. The second one is maybe the newest one, and this is the recognition that teaching artistry actually has a place in the development of artists. It isn't just the tunnel pipeline of training, but in fact, teaching artists bring this empathetic connection to audiences, curiosity about how artworks work inside audiences, that is a powerful tool to bring into the training of artists to widen the tunnel training. And in fact, many conservatories have teaching artists in their programs. I worked at Juilliard for 12 years, training graduate students of music to become ninja teaching artists. And sure enough, they've had gorgeous big careers. In fact, they have made more money and had more variety in their careers than their colleagues who didn't learn to become teaching artists. It expands the range and satisfaction and creative control that is available in an artistic career. That third, arts integration, there's a lot of that in Canada and the US, and some of you may have been involved in that. The idea there is you bring a teaching artist into partnership with an academic subject, and you teach that academic subject with an artistic engagement so that both the interest in the arts and in the particular art, like a dance math connection, you're more interested in dance and you go further in math. That arts integration is a big experiment, and it's not so easy to do, but boy, when it works, it really works. Both disciplines go further. Students are far more engaged and motivated. And maybe most potent of all, students recognize the relevance of what they're learning because of that artistic piece. It isn't just rote learning anymore. It actually, because you're making stuff you care about in the medium, suddenly all of that learning makes sense. You take it in deeper, you respond better, and in fact, you even test better. So that is an experiment, particularly in North America, but I've noticed it spreading around the world. Community, often teaching artists in this work are called community artists. It's the beautiful, long legacy history of making community engagement through murals and community choruses, enriching the quality of community life through arts engagement. Political activism, oh my goodness, teaching artists have been on the front lines of this in recent years when teaching artists step forward about racial justice issues and about economic justice issues and you name it. Teaching artists using their capacity to activate artistry in other people to further that political goal. Social personal development. Some of you may know about the El Sistema movement or music for social change around the world. I've been very involved in that. And this is the belief that by working intensely in musical ensembles, kids with disadvantaged backgrounds can in fact have whole new possibilities for their lives and their range of choices in life because of the capacities they learn through intensive musical engagement. So this is the use of teaching artistry through music or other art form to inspire personal development goals, skills in the world through teaching artistry. And finally, partnering for non-arts goals, that's a terrible title for a thread, kind of boring, but this is when you partner with a non-arts organization to help it achieve its goals. I've been hired many times by businesses to help them increase the creativity and level of innovation in their programs, or even the teamwork. And one of the biggest growth areas in arts for healthcare at this point is teaching artists working in the training of medical professionals, sharpening their capacity to observe, and in fact, as research is showing, make more accurate medical diagnoses after they learn how to observe and patiently take in the information of a painting. They actually diagnose medical conditions more accurately. Art saves lives. I'm not going to deal with digital at this point. That's a whole area our field has been thrust into since the pandemic, and we have a lot of learning to do there. Thank you, Patrick, for that. So that's a little look at how the field is comprised. And now it's driven by these opportunities, but it is not a well-organized field. Not in the US, which has been trying to organize longer than Canada has. It's full of local connections. that never quite turn into the kind of connectedness that can make people widely aware of what this workforce can do for them. I must say, I've been hearing about conversations in at least 4 Canadian cities that are, I would say, are the beginnings of networking conversations. People are wanting to tap the wealth of teaching artistry that is there, but that is sort of struggling to succeed as a field because it's invisible and consequently can't find regular channels for training new talent regular channels for the hiring of teaching artists, for the many things they can do. My goodness, New York City hires a teaching artist in residence for 11 of its government departments. A teaching artist in residence in the sanitation garbage department to help them think with greater creativity about the goal they have in mind. There are now 17 partnerships across the US between medical schools and art museums with teaching artists training doctors. I am now working with teaching artists who are commissioned around the world to activate environmental changes at the local level. Teaching artists hired to change the beliefs and practices and regulations for local environmental crises in the face of our climate crisis. Teaching artists are in schools to activate the quality of engagement of schools. There's this gigantic opportunity that has some life. There's work, not enough. It isn't paid well enough. It's all almost there. And that's part of why I'm grateful for this evening tonight, when the NAC puts a spotlight on this capacity and says, this is significant enough for us to think about investing in building an infrastructure so that we can tap this power and accomplish some of the most difficult challenges that we've struggled to across the field. So before I invite Catherine back up and see if we have some questions from you all, I want to double check 2 things. I want to challenge you, actually. I want to challenge you, number one, to think about how this might serve you. And what could you personally do to get a little more of this goodie for yourself? How could you learn more about teaching artistry? It's widely available. If you just start asking around a little bit, you're going to start to find ways in. Maybe you're going to do that. I can assure you the rewards make for a much fuller artist's life. And second, those who have some capacity for field building, can you start building some networks? Maybe it's just a book club. Maybe it's call one person a month and see if there's some commonalities that can be built on. Will you take one step toward building this field? This giant is ready to rise. And I want to encourage both the institutions like NAC and some others that are looking at building this field, and from the grassroots up, express your energy. It's an entrepreneurial field at this point, and it can become more established in a system if we demand it and if the world starts to recognize what it can provide. So let me ask Catherine and colleagues if there are some questions that have arisen during the great blatheration.
Hello, yes, so we have a few comments from the opening Red Wheelbarrow performances. So Samantha from Calgary says, Red Wheelbarrow, yes. And Joanna said the third one killed the poem for me.
Yeah, we do that. We do that with the best of intention. We go up and we tell people stuff, and we are just flattening the art part of them that wants to reach into it. And then Samantha, thank you for that. Yes, because it doesn't take much to invite people to, kind of bring what they've got, what brought them to the moment. And once the imagination is sparked, once you start to picture what's lying outside that young girl's window, everything starts to change because the artist in you is engaged. And not only does the art deepen, the art starts to matter more to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So Sam and Anne, they liked the readings of number 1 and number 4. And Sam also said that the reading of the 4th poem made her cry a little bit.
Oh, right. And Samantha may have noticed one little side benefit for artists. My reading of the poem the 4th time was better. There's rewards for the artist. It was with that preparation, I was more prepared to be in that poem. So it even deepens your art making. It isn't just for others, it's for art, and it works.
Yes. Such a beautiful example. I loved how you were talking about, the starting of these networks, starting from the ground up. We're also hearing some people in the chat saying that, yes, they're hearing these conversations as well. We have a question from Joanna saying that I've been trying to talk about TA in Brazil, teaching artistry in Brazil. I'm still struggling to find a good translation to Portuguese for the term, and though I feel it might make a big difference. So I don't know, any thoughts there?
Well, I'll give her just one example. I mean, Brazil is a big country, so to sort of give one example is pitiful, but one of the most beautiful bodies of teaching artist work that I've seen recently is from Florianopolis in Brazil. If your guests can look up the School of the Impossible. Actually, if you go to the ITAC, International Teaching Artist Collaborative website, and look under climate, you'll find a whole lot about the School for the Impossible, which is a teaching artist project. It began in just one classroom this year, inviting kids to be secret agents from the future, discovering how to attune to nature. It worked so well, the kids confronted their families and adults with why they weren't protecting the environment better. The school district loved it so much, it is now required curriculum across Florianopolis, and they've started to teach it in Scotland. So one teaching artist team that had a good idea, it is spreading like wildfire to train consciousness of climate through teaching artistry, spreading like wildfire in 6 months.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. Thank you for that. Kevin says, often healthcare requires evidence-based research to accept a new kind of meaning making. How do you navigate these demands of proof?
You ask one of the tough questions, and thanks for asking it. We don't produce the kind of double-blind study research that the U.S. government requires for standard methodological acceptance. However, teaching artists have become much more serious about assessing their work in stable ways. One of the main tools that I use, although not as statistically oriented as the question is, I recommend a report called The Continuum of Impact. And it lets us look at impact not just in statistically significant ways, but actually multiple kinds of impact that are readily accessible from the data that happens in a community project. So all of the projects commissioned by ITAC, International Teaching Artists Collaborative, require that the teaching artist use the continuum of impact, collect data, and be able to make a pretty fair report on the evidence of the kind of impact they had. So it's not exactly the Centers for Disease Control kind of research, but it is the kind of research that anyone who knows about social science research will take seriously, and lets us have a conversation with people in regulatory positions and people in government policy. So it's not the age of just magic and wishful thinking and children's smiling faces anymore. We've really grown up a whole lot as a field, and if you have that research bent, we could do with more of your thinking in our field. Come in and nudge us.
Yeah, that's so great. Joanna commented back. She said, "Nice. Thank you for the tip, Eric, and I'll try to connect with him." Joanna is also recommending a book here. There's a great resource book, The Power of Music, by Susan Hallam.
Susan Hallam, one of the great music educators from the UK. I mean, they have such a powerful tradition of music education in England. I mean, it kind of puts North America to shame, I must say. And some of their work has gone so deep. They've done a lot of social change, music for social change work. Perhaps the most respected music for social change program in the world outside of Venezuela is Sistema Scotland. And for our other listener, they have done some heavy duty research. They actually have been able to calculate the benefit of this program to the finances of the sponsoring cities. They actually have hard numbers and hard, reliable data done by medical scientists. So look up the research of Sistema Scotland, and you will be amazed at how we can quantify impact.
Oh, that's so great. We have Anne here that said, "You mentioned 4 communities in Canada were making a significant initiatives in the arena. What communities are these, and what would you identify as them as doing that's helping the field?"
Well, if I said they are making significant advances, I overstated. What I really mean to imply was I have heard of conversations in Vancouver, in Calgary, in Montreal, and of course in Ottawa, where there are people who are in conversation about how to build networks. I can't, to your listener's question, claim that they've actually accomplished networks, new kinds of networks yet. But what I do want to make clear is my sense in Canada that it's right on the edge of something, that there's been a lot of quiet time and things that just have gone along and kind of grown in their organic way, but there's almost a tipping point happening. And so even though I can't point to where the tipping point has tipped, I do want your listeners to recognize, if you have any impulse in this regard, now is the time to step it up. Now is the time to make the awkward call, to find out from a friend, because that's what can tip it. And it's almost wanting to happen, and it's never happened before. So thank you for this evening. And for those of you listening who have a feel for it, put in that extra ounce of entrepreneurial energy right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's this sense of energy that we feel across the country. Alberto has a comment here. He also has noted in New Brunswick, we know we have Sistema New Brunswick out there as well, which they've been doing some beautiful teaching artistry work. Another comment from Alberto says, "This is wonderful. The University of Application is astonishing."
Fantastic. And let me underscore that nice shout out to Sistema New Brunswick, which is one of the most remarkable Sistema programs anywhere.
Yes.
I can't brag about them enough. I send people to study what they accomplish. So everyone on this call should know there's something extraordinary that's happening at Sistema New Brunswick.
Yes, so many amazing things. Just before we end the evening, a few more questions. You talked about how we are still developing networks of support within the field. What are key factors that are needed to further develop the field and create a stronger sense of community?
I think the field, as I have always aspired for the U.S. field to develop, and I can't say it's been particularly successful, is I think a healthy growth comes from the top and the bottom. I think a top-down growth We certainly need some funding. We need some leading organizations that will take a step and say, we will take this step to convene. We will take this step to support the development of new teaching artists. We will take this step to build opportunities that allow for laddering of growth. But it also has to happen from the grassroots, so it doesn't just become, you know, please big organizations do it for us, create gigs for me. It's too passive. It's not teaching artistry. There has to be fire at the grassroots where people who love to do stuff together figure out how to do stuff together and make it visible, where they make one another's work visible, where they bring in young people and create work that is so exciting that the larger institutions want to celebrate what teaching artistry can do. That's how, you know, the medical school hears about programs that train doctors in visual acuity through teaching artistry to get more accurate medical diagnosis. That's how they hear about the teaching artist, indigenous teaching artist who's working in these historically beautiful ways is actually accomplished something that can grow in schools. It's only through greater visibility and the sheer vitality of not working in solo silos, but in fact coming together at the grassroots and then being recognized with some support networks from the top. And hello, funders, it is time. It is time, funders. You rely on teaching artists to do the pioneering work of the arts organizations that you support. Now is the time to support the pioneers who do that work if you want to have innovation in Canadian arts.
So well said. That reminds me of earlier when you were talking about how the field of teaching artistry is very entrepreneurial at this point, and so there's many, you know, avenues that can be explored. Before we end our time together, what are some things that are giving you hope and inspiration about the field of teaching artistry right now?
I am currently, one of my big projects, the one that's actually making me the craziest right now, is creating an online 25-hour online course for teaching artistry for social impact. It'll be made available free to artists anywhere. And the idea is to step up your game, to actually take all the good stuff you know how to do in schools or in a project you get hired for, and actually step it up to address significant social challenges. It's a course that will help you do that and leave you with a project you're ready to launch at the end. The reason I'm hopeful as well as exhausted is there is a demand for this course. In the first time of my 40 whatever years in this field, young artists in particular, looking at the climate, looking at traumatized youth, looking at social injustices, are saying, I want my artistry to make a difference to that. I don't just want to be hired for art gigs. I want to go further. I want to do more. And the demand to actually have that kind of impact, I have never felt it stronger. And while this course is one tool, the real power is in this rising demand from artists to actually broaden what they want to do with their art. And when an artist wants to do something, things start to happen. The intrinsic motivation to make a social impact is coming to life. And whenever I have contact with Canada, I feel it especially strong there. And so what gives me hope more than anything is that it's not just teaching artistry so there can be some extra gigs to pay the rent, but it's actually teaching artistry so we can get past these hideous social challenges that have got us stumped as a culture. And I'm ready to pass it to the young, but I want to pass it to the young with teaching artistry in their hands.
Yes. Such beautiful examples of how we can create change and deepen meaning in our work. So great. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for this inspiring presentation. You've given us such wonderful, tangible, and approaches that we can bring to our teaching artist practices, and just information about the field and exciting new avenues. I want to thank everyone who was able to join us for this webinar, Awakening the Sleeping Giant, Surveying the Field of Teaching Artistry. If you're enjoying this series, make sure to stay tuned for our next event, which will be with the Heart Center that's in Kingston, Ontario, and we will be looking at aspects of accessibility within the arts, and that will premiere June 1st. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.